For nearly 2 centuries, Gull's Point Lighthouse has perched on the rocky promontory at the mouth of Mariner's Bluff Harbor, its whitewashed towers shining through gale and fog. Travel guides describe it as an emblem of New England's nautical heritage, extolling its classic ironwork, sweeping clifftop vistas, and tales of heroic ship rescues in fierce storms. On summer weekends, tour groups clamber up the spiral steps in bright raincoats, peering out from the lantern room windows at the churning gray sea. Gift shops boast postcards of the lighthouse at sunset, t-shirts reading, "I braved the haunted tower," and mugs printed with stylized ghosts drifting through its gallery. Locals lean into the reputation. Kayak tours at dusk cost extra to chase phantom lantern lights on the water, while thrill-seekers pay to spend the night in the keeper's quarters. Baristas in town wink knowingly as they serve up haunted harbor lattes, sprinkled with edible silver glitter for an eerie shimmer. Mariner's Bluff thrives on the mystery. After all, who wouldn't pay top dollar to sleep in a supposedly cursed place? The most enduring tale is of the 3 lighthouse keepers who vanished one moonless winter in 1947. According to the sanitized version on every brochure, they simply walked into the fog one night after reporting strange noises, voices echoing off the cliffs, the logbook noted, and never returned. An early official inquiry proposed a freak landslide had swallowed them in an undiscovered crevice below the cliff's edge. Their boots and lanterns were found intact, but the men themselves were gone. As years passed, oral retellings warped the story. Some say the trio were lured away by ghostly siren calls on the wind. Others whisper of a curse placed on the tower by a betrayed keeper's lover. By the time I arrived, the vanishings had become legend, untouchable by sober history. Ghost tour operators hand out white sheet capes and recite dramatic monologues on the deck beneath the light. Town elders nod at children's dares to spend a night in the attic. But beneath every lantern's glow lies a question. Why had no one ever looked beyond the landslide story? Why did every serious researcher abandon the inquiry after a few weeks? I'm Julianne Hayes, and until 5 years ago, I was the archivist at the Mariner's Bluff Historical Society. I prided myself on preserving local memory, handwritten diaries, ship logs, and faded town council minutes. One damp Tuesday afternoon, I came across a reference to something called Operation Aurora in a locked file, conspicuously indexed among innocuous records. When I opened it, I found incomplete shipping manifests, cryptic marginalia instructing "deliver to GPL keepers only," and crossed out lines that hinted at death tolls. I approached my supervisor, expecting an explanation. Instead, he warned me in hushed tones. "There are some things best left buried, Julianne. Drop it." I refused. By week's end, I'd been ousted from the society, labeled a troublemaker, my security badge deactivated. Operation Aurora disappeared from the catalog overnight, as if it never existed. For years, I chased dead ends. Local officials stonewalled interviews. Archives produced nothing more than folklore. I wondered if the entire town had coordinated to hide its past. Then, last month, a letter arrived, slipped beneath my front door mat. No return address, only a single sheet of parchment scrawled in an unfamiliar, trembling hand. "They don't want you to know what we did in the dark, but the sea remembers." Tucked beneath it was a torn page from an old lighthouse logbook. In the margin, an arrow pointing to an address, Gull's Point Lighthouse. Nothing else. My pulse raced as I realized. The same place I'd been forbidden to investigate was calling me back. That night, I packed a duffel bag with camera gear, a tape recorder, a portable light, and a blowtorch, just in case. I drove out of town under a half-moon and parked at the base of the bluff. The lighthouse's silhouette loomed, its weathered stones flickering in my taillights. I took a deep breath. The ghosts might welcome visitors, but I came for the living secrets buried below. By the time I climbed the winding path, dusk had deepened into inky black. The wind cut like a blade, carrying the tang of salt and the distant cry of gulls. My flashlight's beam carved a narrow cone of brightness across cracked masonry. The keeper's house stood empty, its windows shuttered and boards nailed up. I slipped inside through a broken side door, heart thudding. Once inside, the scent of mildew and rust hit me. A dusty oil can lay overturned on the floor, its contents long since evaporated. Peeling paint curled like dead skin. On the mantel, a brass plaque read simply, Gulls Point Lighthouse, established 1831. The silence felt alive, as though the walls themselves were listening. Overhead, the spiral staircase to the lantern room beckoned, but I forced myself to stay focused. I had a tip to follow. I found the keeper's quarters down a long hallway, where iron bunk beds once housed watchmen. A closet door stood slightly ajar. I pulled it open and discovered an alcove behind it, barely wide enough for a person. Sweat beaded on my brow as I wriggled inside, flashlight in hand. The alcove led to a short flight of stairs carved directly into the bedrock. Each step descended into utter darkness. At the bottom, my light flickered over wooden crates stamped with faded lettering and coil-bound journals. I pried one free. On its cover, carefully inked in block letters, GPL log confidential. Inside, pages of neat handwriting detailed nightly deliveries coded as Aurora, 17, Midnight Transit, and Cargo, PG 12. My blood ran cold. These were the same codes referenced in the customs files I'd uncovered years ago. The light from my torch shook as I realized the lighthouse wasn't just an old maritime beacon, it was the hub of something far darker. I cleared crates aside to reveal a crumbling alcove, its walls carved with symbols I had never seen, spirals, tridents, and a stylized wave that seemed to move in the dim light. At the far end lay a single oil lamp, its wick encased in centuries of dust. Beneath it, wrapped in a moth-eaten cloth, rested a bound manuscript whose title page read Rituals of the Eternal Tide. I gingerly opened it. The pages were yellowed and brittle, but the ink remained surprisingly vivid. The text chronicled the foundation of a secret society calling itself the Children of the Sea, formed in 1938 by the town's wealthiest families. They believed the ocean possessed a living spirit that granted rebirth and extended life, provided its adherents offered a pure sacrifice. The manuscript described ceremonies during which blood was taken at high tide and blessings granted at dawn. Names of leaders were omitted, replaced by titles: High Keeper, Tide Binder, Sea Speaker. Further on, the manuscript became more disturbing. It recounted luring drifters, fishermen down on their luck, and even fishermen's wives into the tunnel under pretense of work or safety. Once inside, victims were bound and brought before a carved basin, a stone trough shaped like a scallop shell, where their blood pooled. The text claimed that at the moment of life's final exhalation, the tide's power flowed through the sacrifice into the keepers, renewing their youth and wealth. The dates of the ceremonies aligned chillingly with the disappearance of at least 12 people between 1940 and 1960, a cargo handler who vanished from the docks, a lighthouse helper whose boat washed ashore empty, a farm laborer who never returned from the fields. Their names were redacted, but the victims' profiles matched missing persons files I'd dug up years ago. Cold dread settled in my bones. The ghosts people spoke of were not restless spirits seeking peace, they were evidence of monstrous acts that had to remain buried. My eyes traveled back to the shipping manifests in the crates. One code, PG-12, appeared repeatedly during wartime and afterward. I cross-referenced it with declassified customs records I'd obtained under the Freedom of Information Act. PG-12 meant powdered gold, a euphemism for opium. During World War II, opium shipments disguised as medical supplies passed through the harbor under the lighthouse's watch, then were broken down into small caches stashed in hollowed barrels and buried near tide pools. Another code, Midnight Transit, referred to shipments from the wreck of the Nuestra Señora de la Gloria, a 17th-century Spanish galleon scuttled offshore. Salvaged cargo, once used for artifacts, suddenly reappeared in barrels marked for the lighthouse. In the logs, each arrival was followed by a midnight transfer to waiting boats. I realized the keepers were facilitating large-scale smuggling, using their ritual activities as cover for criminal profits. B. Local complicity. I needed proof of modern complicity, so I pocketed the manuscripts in crates and climbed back to the keepers' quarters. There, behind a false panel, I discovered black and white photographs dated the 1950s, austere men in seafaring coats, shaking hands on the lighthouse platform, well-dressed women in fur collars, stern-faced businessmen passing manila envelopes. Each photo was discreetly labeled, commissioning, investment, blessing right. Word of mouth had it the town's most venerable families, shipyard proprietors, bank presidents, and town councilors met at the keeper's house across the cove for dinners. My informant, a retired deckhand, whispered that at each meal they toasted the tide's favor and distributed shares of the smuggled opium profits. They believed their pact with the sea spirits ensured prosperity, so long as they kept the rituals secret and the shipments flowing. Back in my motel room, I examined the rituals of the Eternal Tide manuscript by lamplight. Between lines of doctrine, I found scrawled confessions in different handwriting. I drowned her body at 2 a.m. No one asked questions. The judge will never look for a fisherman's wife in the tobacco fields. We have the sheriff on our side, as long as we honor the blessing. These notes proved the keepers themselves were complicit not just in smuggling, but in covering up murder. I recorded each phrase on my phone, every whispered atrocity driving home the Colt's reach. The margins named no names, but the dates and references matched local court records of unsolved disappearances and suspicious drownings. I also found a rusted tin box nailed beneath a beam in the tunnel's ceiling. Inside lay a single folded letter dated 1952 from a woman named Maren Jacobs. If you read this, know I escaped. They will come for you next. The tide took my sister, but I survived. I hide in plain sight, but soon they will find me. Maren's name appeared in no obituary. Her sister's death was ruled accidental drowning. Maren was never found. I realized she must have assumed a new identity in Mariner's Bluff, always looking over her shoulder. My chest tightened as I wondered, was she still alive, watching, or had she vanished the moment she sent this plea? I returned to town under a cloud of fear, carrying the logs, photos, and letter. Research at the registrar's office and recent phone directories identified one surviving family tied to the original trustees, the Harrows. Patriarch Victor Harrow, town council member, head of the Maritime Preservation Committee, and trustee of the Historical Society. Controlled zoning laws that kept excavations off limits. His granddaughter managed the gift shop, and his son ran the local shipping company. They had everything to lose. Armed with my evidence, I arranged to film the next town council meeting under the guise of a historical segment. The packed chambers buzzed with proud seniors in their Civic League blazers and eager reporters. When Victor Harrow rose to speak on a proposed preservation grant for the lighthouse, I pressed record on my phone and stepped to the podium. Mr. Harrow, I said calmly, could you explain the reason underground excavation has been forbidden at Gulls Point for 70 years, despite public interest? His smooth facade flickered. He stammered, there are safety concerns, unstable cliffs, land rights. Here, I continued, projecting photos of shipping manifests on the screen behind me, our documents stamped GPL Confidential, your family's insignia. And here, I read from Maren's letter, is proof the lighthouse was a ritual site for sacrifices and smuggling. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Harrow's face went pale. He slammed his gavel. This is slander, fabricated nonsense. But as I unveiled a fragment of the carved ritual basin, whispers turned to gasps. Counselors exchanged worried glances. A few elderly members slunk from the room, heads bowed. The local paper ran my exposé under a banner headline, Lighthouse of Blood, Mariner's Bluff's Elite Exposed. Inside were grainy photos of the tunnel carvings, interviews with a retired deckhand turned whistleblower, and excerpts from rituals of the Eternal Tide. State Police reopened the 1947 inquiry, federal agents launched a customs investigation into PG-12 shipments. Harrow's grandson resigned from the shipping company. Gift shops removed haunted tours. The tourist economy shuddered under the weight of scandal. Yet, even as low-level participants were arrested, sutlers who smuggled crates, fishermen who ferried vessels, Victor Harrow himself vanished. His estate went into lockup. Rumors swirled that he fled abroad under an alias. But townsfolk still whisper of midnight gatherings in the cliffs, saying the children of the sea still swear their oaths when the foghorn wails. New disappearances have already been reported. A drifter gone without trace, a fisherman's small boat found adrift. The cult's core may be broken, but its influence endures. I've received veiled threats slipped under my door, one note reading simply, "Some stones should not be turned." Last week, someone shot out the tires of my car with a high-velocity rifle. My phone's messages are monitored, my emails rerouted through unknown servers. Yet silence is complicity. If you've come this far, you deserve to know. The shadows at Gull's Point aren't mere folklore. This is a conspiracy of blood and wealth, protected by betrayal and fear. They don't want you to know who truly owns the tide, who still echoes in those tunnels. And they will do anything to bury the evidence, just as they buried their victims. Exposing the children of the sea has cost me my career, my sense of security, and nearly my life. I've lost friends who begged me to stop, and I've watched my name smeared by paid spokesmen calling me a hysterical interloper. But history belongs to those who remember it, not those who erase it. Gull's Point Lighthouse will never be the same bright beacon it once was. In my photographs, its tower looms like a sentinel watching over dark secrets. I remain Julianne Hayes, insider turned whistleblower, haunted by the truth I've uncovered. I know this path is dangerous, but knowledge is a weapon. The ghosts you fear aren't the only ones trapped inside. And as long as I breathe, I will shine a light into the tunnel's depths, because some secrets must surface, no matter the cost.